My name is Ethan Vale. I'm 44 years old, and for 19 years I devoted everything I had to one company. I wasn't just an employee, I was the architect behind our growth, the one who pulled us through 3 recessions and 2 leadership changes. I never asked for recognition, I just wanted to build something solid. And for a long time I thought loyalty mattered. I thought that if I kept my head down, stayed honest, and delivered results, I'd always have a seat at the table. But I forgot one thing. Blood trumps everything, especially when the man across from you wears your success like a borrowed suit. The company was called Titan Edge Solutions, and when I joined, it was barely a whisper in the industry. The founder, Raymond Sloan, took a chance on me. I respected him. I trusted him. He used to say, "We rise together, Ethan, always." And for years we did. I turned dead contracts into million-dollar accounts. I brought in systems that cut costs by 40%. I helped him build something from the ground up. But then came the day I walked into the conference room and saw a stranger sitting at the end of the table. Raymond stood beside him and smiled like it was a family portrait. "This is Kyle," he said. "My son. He'll be shadowing you." Shadowing turned to questioning. Questioning turned to undermining. Within 6 months, Kyle was being introduced as the future of the company. He'd show up late, take credit for strategies I built, and dismiss the people who had held the walls up for years. Raymond saw it. He knew it, but he did nothing. Maybe he thought it was temporary. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. I noticed everything, including the day I was called into Raymond's office for what I thought was a performance review. Instead, it was a soft execution. "We're restructuring," he said. "Kyle has some bold ideas for the next chapter, and we need to clear space at the top." I didn't say a word. I didn't ask questions. I just stood up, shook his hand, and walked out. No anger, just silence. But inside, something sharp and quiet began to take root. They hadn't just taken my job. They had thrown away everything I'd built to prop up someone who had done nothing to earn it. I went home that night and opened a dusty folder I hadn't touched in years, my old personal business plan. Back when I was young, before Titan Edge, I had sketched out what my own company might look like. I read every page in silence. Then I poured a glass of whiskey and read it again, because I wasn't just walking away from a job, I was walking toward something far bigger. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a reckoning. And I would deliver it with the same calm precision they once praised me for. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that for nearly 2 decades I had been the spine of their empire. Every process, every client, every system. I didn't need their company to survive, but they would need mine, because I was about to build something in the shadows, something that would one day hold them in the palm of its hand. The first thing I did was nothing. For 2 weeks, I disappeared. No posts, no calls, just silence. I knew Raymond expected me to move on quietly, maybe take a role at a competitor, or vanish into consulting. He never expected me to play the long game. That's how I knew I'd already won the first move. Because the minute someone underestimates you, they give you permission to build in peace. And I intended to build in a way that would make them regret every smug smile they wore as I packed my box. I reached out to 2 people quietly. One was Mira, a systems engineer, who had once told me, "If you ever start your own firm, call me first." The other was Paul, a senior strategist, who Raymond once overlooked for a leadership role, because he wasn't management material. Both of them answered my call within minutes. No questions, just, "When do we start?" We didn't lease an office. We didn't put up a website. We didn't even choose a name. All we did was get to work. We knew Titan Edge inside out. We knew the contracts that were up for renewal, the vendors they depended on, the clients who were quietly frustrated but too entangled to leave. I didn't poach. I didn't sabotage. I offered alternatives. Better tech, smoother onboarding, lower fees, higher integrity. I built a company in the image of everything Titan Edge forgot to be once Kyle took over. And slowly, clients began to reach out. Quietly, cautiously, but consistently. Meanwhile, I watched Kyle from the sidelines. His ego was louder than his leadership. His decisions were surface level, full of buzzwords and social media polish, but empty underneath. Employees started leaving. Slowly at first, then in waves. Mira sent me a screenshot from LinkedIn. Another one gone. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because I didn't want collapse. I wanted clarity. I wanted them to see exactly what they'd thrown away and who they gave it to instead. By month 6, we had a full client list and were operating under the radar. We chose the name Greywall Strategies. Quiet, sharp, and untraceable back to me for now. We focused on efficiency, innovation, and above all, discretion. Every time I signed a new contract, I thought of that day in Raymond's office. The warmth in his voice when he said, "Kyle has some bold ideas." I wondered if those ideas included hemorrhaging clients, or if he ever lay awake at night, realizing he'd fired the one person who kept the foundation from cracking. One evening, I received a message from an old client. High value, long term. The kind Titan Edge used to boast about. The message was brief. Heard you're building something better. Can we talk? I closed my laptop slowly. The game was changing, not because I demanded it, but because the people they once ignored were finally remembering who did the real work, and I was just getting started. By the 9th month, we weren't just surviving, we were scaling. Greywall Strategies had quietly become a rising force in the same sectors Titan Edge once dominated, but we moved differently. No flashy ads, no LinkedIn grandstanding, just word of mouth and results. The kind of results that made executives whisper, "Who's behind this firm?" I let the mystery grow, because mystery creates leverage, and I didn't want them to know it was me, not yet. We secured 3 of Titan Edge's top 5 legacy clients within a quarter, not through coercion, but through clarity. These clients remembered the old days, the days when calls were answered before the 3rd ring, when solutions were proposed before problems became crises. What Kyle saw as outdated methods, they remembered as reliability. One of the clients even said, "This feels like the version of Titan Edge we used to trust." I nodded and smiled. I didn't need them to know why. I just needed them to stay. Meanwhile, Kyle kept building a facade. Posts about next-gen disruption, announcements about hiring sprees. Internally, though, the rot was spreading. A junior manager at Titan Edge, who used to report to me, reached out privately. Her message read, "I don't know what's happening anymore. Everything's chaos. No one's listening, and the good people are leaving." I remembered her sharp, loyal, undervalued. I asked one question. "You free Friday?" She joined us the next week. Raymond still hadn't reached out. I imagined he was too proud, or too guilty, or both. I often wondered if he realized just how far Titan Edge had slipped. He built something worth respecting, and then he handed it off to a boy who only understood titles, not trust. But I wasn't waiting for him to notice. I was building the solution to the mistake he refused to admit. Then came the government contract, a multi-million-dollar RFP that both Titan Edge and Greywall were invited to bid on. It was a high-profile account, the kind of deal that defined credibility. Mira looked at me across the table when we saw the invite. "Are we doing this?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just slid the folder to Paul. He smiled. "Let's go get what should have always been ours." And I didn't want to just win the bid. I wanted to win it with grace, with precision, and with every metric they used to measure fit. We surpassed them. Better delivery timelines, more competitive rates, proven leadership. The irony, the entire proposal was structured using a framework I created 5 years ago, back when I trained Kyle and he wasn't paying attention. Now, it would be the very thing that outperformed him. We submitted the proposal on a Wednesday, clean, confident, quiet, no follow-ups, no desperation, just the full weight of our experience wrapped in something too polished to ignore. It felt poetic, bidding against the company I helped build using the systems they threw away, and I didn't need to hope we'd win. I already knew what was happening inside Titan Edge. Kyle had no process discipline, no leadership presence, and certainly no team that would fight for him the way mine fought for me. A week passed, then 2, and then came the email. Subject line, RFP decision, award notification. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it, because I knew what came next wouldn't just change our trajectory, it would send a message. I clicked, slowly, and there it was. We are pleased to award the contract to Greywall Strategies based on superior solution design, client trust indicators, and execution capacity. No flair, no applause, just proof. We'd won, cleanly, decisively, publicly. The news broke in the industry within hours. People started asking questions. Who is Greywall? Where did they come from? The clients who'd quietly followed us now stood proud, sharing our success as their own. And Titan Edge, their press release, tried to soften the blow, spinning the loss as part of a strategic pivot. But the truth was bleeding through. Investors noticed. Internal whispers grew louder. And somewhere in a glass office, Kyle was probably yelling into a conference call, wondering why the world didn't work the way his father promised it would. That night I got a message from a number I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Raymond. It was short. Call me when you have a moment. I stared at it for a while, not out of fear, not out of anger, out of curiosity. Had he finally connected the dots? Did he now realize that the quiet architect of his empire had walked out with the blueprints? I didn't call back. Not yet. I wanted him to sit with it, to feel the silence I had swallowed the day he handed my seat to his son. Days later, a recruiter forwarded me a copy of Titan Edge's job listing. Head of Strategy, immediate need. The role was mine once, then Kyle's shadow, now vacant. The description was almost laughable, listing qualifications that described my resume line by line. I sent it to Mira and Paul. None of us replied with words. We didn't need to. The listing said everything. Titan Edge wasn't just bleeding, it was looking for the person it had already thrown away. Then came a new email from Raymond. This one longer, measured. I made a mistake, he wrote, and if you're open to it, I'd like to meet. I closed the message and let it sit. Because I hadn't built Greywall to prove anything to him. I built it to prove something to myself, but still, something about that final sentence stayed with me. Because it sounded less like a power play, and more like a man watching his life's work slip through fingers too entitled to tighten their grip. It was a rainy Tuesday when I agreed to meet Raymond. Neutral ground. A private club downtown. Quiet, old money, full of men like him who had once ruled every room they walked into. I arrived first, took the booth facing the entrance. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt method. That's what survival turns into after betrayal. Not bitterness, but boundary. When he walked in, I noticed he looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. The man who once made decisions with a handshake now carried the weight of all the ones he'd gotten wrong. He sat down without making eye contact for the first few seconds. No assistant, no Kyle, just Raymond. Finally, he said, "You look good, Ethan." I nodded. "So do you." I lied. He looked tired, like someone who had stayed up too late fixing something that no longer worked. He cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Apologies, when they're this late, aren't for resolution. They're for record keeping, and I let him speak. He went on about Kyle, about how he thought he'd grow into the role and how he never imagined things would go sideways so quickly. He mentioned investors, morale, revenue losses. I listened, calm, quiet. My silence was heavier than anything he said. Finally, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "I need your help." There it was. The real reason. He hadn't called for closure. He called because the house was burning down and he needed the man who once built the foundation. I leaned back. "You fired me, Ray, to make room for someone who thought leadership was just a parking space." He sighed. "I know, and I'm asking if there's a way back from that." For a moment I saw the man I once admired, the mentor, the visionary. But then I remembered how easily he discarded me the moment family pride got in the way of business truth. I shook my head. "There's no way back," I said quietly, "but there is a way forward without me in your building." He asked if I'd be willing to merge. An acquisition, a seat at the table again. I looked him straight in the face. "We don't merge with what we've outgrown." He flinched. That sentence held more weight than any public failure, because it came from someone who didn't just walk away. I walked above. I stood, took my coat, left him there with the check, the regret, and the echo of everything he gave away for bloodline loyalty. That night I updated the Greywall internal portal, Titan Edge, officially removed from competitor tracking, not because they no longer mattered, but because their chapter had ended. We weren't chasing them anymore. We had become the company they used to dream of being, and I had become the man they never believed I'd grow into, because I did it without their permission. After that meeting with Raymond, I didn't feel relief. I felt release, like a weight had been lifted that I never agreed to carry. I went back to my office, our real office now, not just co-working spaces and coffee shops. Greywall had grown into something living. We had over 30 employees, a dozen legacy clients, and our name was showing up on industry shortlists without us ever buying ad space. Our strategy was working because it wasn't built on revenge. It was built on remembering everything they forgot. The team knew something had shifted. Mira asked, "Did he try to buy us out?" I nodded. He offered a seat at the table. She smiled, like a lioness who had been waiting for this moment. "You already own the building." She wasn't wrong. And that was the difference. Titan Edge was still trying to make noise. But we had become the gravity. People moved toward us because we gave them something their old firms never did. Real partnership. Real leadership. No filters. No sons of CEOs. Over the next few weeks, the stories came in. Titan Edge laid off another dozen people. One of their flagship clients ended their contract early, citing strategic realignment. Kyle posted a photo from some yacht retreat, completely tone-deaf to the storm brewing in his own building. I didn't celebrate any of it, because this was never about watching them burn. It was about building something they couldn't replicate, because they never understood what made it matter. Then I got the call from a recruiter. Titan Edge's board was seeking new executive leadership. They were planning to remove Raymond and were looking for someone with legacy knowledge and modern edge. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. I told the recruiter, "Greywall doesn't do hand-me-downs." He laughed. "Had to ask." I hung up the phone and stood at the window, staring down at the skyline. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was free. Free from the weight of being underestimated. free from hoping the people who wronged me would one day see my worth. Because I'd built something so undeniable, their recognition no longer mattered. Greywall wasn't just a company, it was a quiet revolution, a home for the ones who were once overlooked, discarded, passed over for louder, less capable replacements. And now we weren't just catching up, we were defining the direction. That night I wrote a letter I'd never send to Kyle. Just one line. Leadership isn't inherited, it's proven. I folded it, lit it with a match, and watched it curl into ash in my fireplace. Some things don't need to be said, they need to be shown. And we were showing it every single day. The turning point came quietly. No headlines, no press release, just a whisper that turned into a ripple, and then a wave. A mid-tier industry magazine released its annual list of top 10 fastest-growing private firms. Greywall Strategies was sent to. Titan Edge wasn't on the list. I read the article twice, not for ego, but for confirmation. The write-up mentioned our innovative leadership, our unusually loyal client base, and our clear edge in strategic retention. They didn't say my name, but I could feel it between every line. Later that week, one of Titan Edge's longtime board members, a man I used to brief personally, requested a meeting. I agreed. He didn't waste time. "You were the difference, weren't you?" I didn't answer right away. He leaned forward. "We didn't realize what we had until you were gone, and now we can't seem to replace you." There it was, the admission, the truth spoken too late. I sipped my coffee and said simply, "Sometimes what you walk away from becomes the foundation of what you build next." He asked if I'd ever consider returning under new leadership. I looked him in the eyes and said something I had never said aloud before. I didn't leave. I was removed, and you all stood by and watched it happen. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He just nodded, ashamed. I stood up and offered my hand. "I hope the next person you ignore isn't the one holding your future." He shook it, quietly, like a man who had nothing left to bargain with. That conversation hit harder than I expected. Not because it hurt, but because I finally understood something. I wasn't proving them wrong anymore. I was proving myself right. All those years of patience, silence, strategy, it hadn't been for revenge, it had been for this. Not applause, not vindication, but alignment. Becoming the person I knew I could be if no one got in my way. Back at the office, we signed 2 new clients that week. Both had been with Titan Edge for over a decade. Their off-boarding letters were polite, professional, but I knew what they really meant. We're choosing something better. Someone better. Mirror framed the magazine article and put it in our conference room. Beneath the glass she wrote in gold ink, "Built in silence, now they speak our name." I looked at it for a long time. That night, I walked home. No driver, no flash, just me and the quiet city I now helped shape. I passed a Titan Edge billboard on 8th Avenue, generic, loud, desperate. I stopped and looked up. Then I smiled, not because they had fallen, but because I had risen, farther than they ever thought I could, and I did it without ever raising my voice. 1 year to the day after I was fired, Titan Edge Solutions filed for reorganization. Not bankruptcy, not yet, but the first public sign that the empire had hollowed out. Industry sites picked it up. Analysts speculated. Competitors circled like vultures. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even comment, because the victory wasn't in watching them fall. The real win had already happened. They lost long before the headlines. They lost the day they traded experience for ego. They lost the day they mistook bloodline for leadership. They lost the day they let me go. That same morning, Greywall hosted a private event for our clients and staff. No stage, no speeches, just community, trust, legacy built the right way. One of our earliest clients raised a toast. To the man who didn't just build a better company, but a better way of doing business, I looked around the room and saw what Titan Edge never had. A team that believed in each other, a foundation made not of fear or politics, but of purpose, of shared vision, and of respect earned, not inherited. Raymond never reached out again. I assume he read the articles. Maybe he still checks our progress from time to time. Maybe he sees our logo on deals they used to own. Maybe Kyle scrolls through our website late at night, wondering how I made it all look so easy. But I didn't make it easy, I made it worth it. Every hour of silence, every slight, every opportunity denied. It became fuel, and I used every drop of it to light a fire they never saw until the smoke reached their rooftop. I framed my old termination letter, hung it in the back hallway of our office. Not out of spite, but as a reminder that power isn't about the seat you're given. It's about the structure you build when they tell you to leave. I never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted to build something no one could take from me. And now the very people who once shut the door work in buildings I own, sign contracts I write, and navigate markets I now lead. To those who are underestimated, overlooked, or quietly pushed aside, hear me clearly. You don't have to scream to take control. You don't need revenge to win. You just need a plan and the patience to let silence grow into strength. Because sometimes, the best way to take a company is to let them hand it to you piece by piece, while they're too busy watching someone else pretend to lead.